Eleanor Whitfield had everything the world said a person should want. Her father, Richard Whitfield, was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, the founder of Whitfield Industries, a multi-billion-dollar empire that spanned pharmaceuticals, real estate, and technology. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. Their family home was a 12-bedroom, a mansion sitting on the edge of a private lake in Connecticut, and Eleanor had grown up swimming in that lake every summer, laughing without a care in the world. But on a cold November evening, everything changed. A reckless driver ran a red light at 60 miles an hour and slammed into the passenger side of Eleanor's car. She survived, barely, but the doctors delivered the news that would shatter her world. The spinal injury was severe. Eleanor Whitfield, 24 years old and full of dreams, would never walk again. The weeks that followed were the darkest of her life. Her father hired the best specialists in the world, flew in surgeons from Switzerland and Japan, and filled her room with the most advanced rehabilitation equipment money could buy. But Eleanor refused it all. She stopped eating regularly. She stopped speaking to visitors. She stared at the ceiling of her hospital room, and in the silence, quietly decided that the life ahead of her was not worth living. Richard Whitfield watched his daughter disappear before his eyes, and for the first time in his life, all his billions meant nothing. There was a man named Daniel Cruz, who worked as a maintenance technician at the rehabilitation center where Eleanor had been transferred. He was 31 years old, lean and quiet, with calloused hands and careful eyes. He was a single father. His wife had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier, and he raised his 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, on his own. Every morning, Daniel arrived at the center before sunrise, fixed what needed fixing, and went about his work without fuss or fanfare. He had known loss. He had known darkness. And perhaps that was why, when he passed Eleanor's room one morning and saw her lying motionless, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes, he stopped. He did not knock loudly or announce himself with cheerfulness. He simply pushed the door open gently and said, in a voice soft as morning light, "Mind if I fix that squeaky wheel on your chair? It's been bothering me for a week." Eleanor didn't respond. Daniel walked in anyway, crouched beside the wheelchair near the window, and began working on it quietly. He didn't try to inspire her. He didn't say everything would be okay. He just worked. And then, before he left, he placed a small drawing on her bedside table, a crayon sketch of a bird with one broken wing, still flying. "That's from Sophia," he said. "She draws one every morning for someone in the building. Today she picked you," and he was gone. Eleanor stared at the drawing for a long time. The next morning, Daniel came back to check on a ventilation issue in her room. Eleanor was sitting up. She didn't speak, but she was sitting up. The morning after that, she asked him quietly who Sophia was. Daniel smiled and told her about his daughter. How Sophia had learned to make pancakes by herself. Because Daniel worked early shifts. How she kept a journal of birds she wanted to see one day. How she once cried for an hour because a worm on the sidewalk was dying and she couldn't save it. Eleanor listened. For the first time in weeks, she listened to someone else's story instead of drowning in her own. Over the days and weeks that followed, Daniel showed up not as a therapist, not as a motivational speaker, and certainly not as someone who pitied her. He showed up as a neighbor shows up, quietly and without condition. He brought Sophia on weekends, and the little girl would sit beside Eleanor's wheelchair and read aloud from her bird journal in a serious voice, as though delivering important news. Eleanor began to smile. Then she began to laugh. Then one Tuesday morning, she looked at the physical therapist waiting at the door and said, "Okay, let's try." The road was brutal. There were days Eleanor wanted to quit, days when the pain in her body matched the pain in her heart, and she screamed into her pillow. But Daniel was there, not always with words, but with presence. He fixed her broken lamp. He brought Sophia's drawings. He sat with her in silence on the hard days and talked with her on the good ones. He never once made her feel like a burden, and he never once made her feel like she owed him anything. Slowly, painstakingly, Eleanor began to rebuild. She regained partial movement in her left leg, something the doctors had called unlikely. She began designing an adaptive sports program for the center, using her father's resources and her own will. She started a foundation that provided free rehabilitation, support and emotional counseling to accident survivors who couldn't afford care. She named it the Sophia Project, after the little girl who had drawn a bird with a broken wing and believed it could still fly. At the foundation's launch event, held at the rehabilitation center 6 months later, Eleanor spoke from her wheelchair to a room full of donors, survivors and staff. Her father sat in the front row with tears he made no effort to hide. She spoke about darkness and about the strange, quiet miracle of being seen. She said, "I did not need someone to fix me. I needed someone to remind me that I was still worth fixing." She looked at Daniel in the crowd, standing near the back in his work uniform, holding Sophia on his hip, and she said, "One man whispered, 'I'll help her.' Not because it was his job, not because he had anything to gain, but because kindness, real kindness, costs nothing and gives everything." Daniel looked down and smiled. The way good people smile when they are uncomfortable being thanked for simply being themselves. Sophia waved. The room applauded. And somewhere in that moment, in the warmth of that room, something quietly completed itself. Not a fairy tale, not a miracle, but something better. A real story about how one ordinary human being can become the turning point in another's life, simply by showing up with gentleness and refusing to look away. Eleanor Whitfield did not get her old life back. She built a new one, wider, deeper, and more beautiful than the first. And it all began with a squeaky wheel, a crayon drawing, and a soft voice that said, "I'll help her." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness. True Stories, where we bring you real and inspiring stories of human compassion, courage, and hope. Your support helps us reach more people who need to hear that kindness still exists in this world. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for being part of our community.